and welcome to the Amy Edwards Show. I'm your host, Amy Edwards. Of course, as usual, I'm beyond excited about today's guest, Dr. Jess Garza. Jess, I can't wait to get to her and tell you all about her. First, let me go through a little business up top. Thank you for being here. We're all about transforming our lives and bettering ourselves all the time in the most efficient way possible because, why not get there a little bit faster and accelerate the process if we can? I'm all about it, and I'm just so excited that you're here. Please, if you feel called during this show, share it with a friend, write us a review and a rating, sign up for the newsletter on my website at amyedwards.com. I'm just so excited to keep this show growing and keep ourselves just rising higher and higher together. So super grateful for you. And I was just discussing intention today with our guest, Jess, and you said that you're all about intention, and I'm just so excited to learn from you today because you are a wealth of knowledge. You have a Ph.D. in performance psychology, a master's in clinical mental health counseling, a master's in sports and exercise psychology, a lot of things going on in your background, and I would love for you to share a little bit more about everything that you do because there's so much.
There is a ton.
Yeah.
I've gotten, yes, to all of those degrees. I am a sports psych and work with a ton of different populations from military intelligence, special forces, all the way down to youth soccer and every Olympian, pro athlete in between. But I didn't always start that way. I started way back as a college student that wanted to work with professional athletes, specifically gymnasts. And at that time, I was finishing up my counseling degree and I was working in the jail systems. And so I was working with domestic violence, substance abuse, and sex offenders. And at that time, I was pregnant with my daughter. So I had some difficulties with some of the sexual abuse cases that I was on because it was just really hard to hear while I was being pregnant.
Oh, I have no doubt.
So I knew that I had to get off those cases pretty quickly because I got jaded pretty fast. And as a counselor, you have to be pretty clear and open to help them through their traumatic experiences as well. So I had a professor that was like, you should submit a resume to the military. And I'm like, no, I have no desire to work with soldiers. Thank you, though. And ends up submitting it for me and got a notification like, we need you to fly out to New York. We would love to have you. So went out to West Point. I was like, oh, that's fine. My sister lives in New York. It's going to be great. It's going to be awesome. it's a nice free vacation to go see her. So I go and I fell in love with the campus. I fell in love.
So beautiful. My sister got married there. I've been up there a few times. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. It's gorgeous.
It really is.
You can't explain it until you're there because the culture is just so different. And so when I got there, I'm like, yep, this is what I'm doing. So within 2 weeks, they were like, pick a city that you want to go to. And I ended up choosing Fort Bragg, working with special forces. And at the time, my daughter was 9-10 months and it was just her and I. Moved from Phoenix to North Carolina and had my first big girl job.
Yeah. And then I should also add, I wanted to add this up top, that you have a TED Talk that has nearly 2 million views and it's excellent. You're so clear and you laid out your strategies so well, which we're going to talk about some today. So did you continue your education then while your daughter was young? And
I did. So by the time I had her, I was finishing up my second master's. I was pregnant with her in my second master's. Had her and then left to go work with the military. And then I started my PhD program while I was with the military. And
how long did that take you?
4.5, 5 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's so impressive. You're so impressive.
Thank you.
Yes. I just, and not only on top of that, you do a lot with business. And I mean, there was a lot on your LinkedIn. So, right, you're a certified project management professional. I'm not even sure exactly what you do with that. And a mental performance consultant.
Yeah. So I also, the mental performance goes back into the certification of what I do to help our credentials in our field be better equipped and accredited and supplying services to athletes, coaches, all the above. From the business standpoint, I go in and really work at or look at mental health, wellness, and well-being within the employees from CEOs all the way down. A lot of the CEOs have constant high rates of like alcoholism, domestic violence, and a significant amount of stress, inability to build relationships back at home or even like in the office because it's just so high demanding things all day long for themselves. And so they don't even know how to decompress. And so we go in and have like one-on-one strategies with them. And then with the team, this kind of goes back in with a little bit of the TED Talk too, just how much we relate to one another and how much we transfer things onto one another, but unconsciously, and how much we take on of other people's just shit throughout the day.
Yeah.
And we don't do anything with it, except we just keep piling it. And then until our body's like, I got to stop.
And you're like, why do I feel terrible?
Correct.
Yeah. One of my things, that's like one of the things in looking through your work that really resonated with me, because over the past couple of years, what I've tried to facilitate in myself through meditation and everything else that I do is this concept of nothing can disturb my vibe, and just saying so strong in my own peace and my own self, my own sense of self and my own emotions, and being so strong in that I'm not taking on other people's things, because I'm one of these people that's like energetically, and I think honestly as humans we just are. Yeah. Which I bet you would probably seen a ton of that, you know. And I just can pick up people's energies really quickly, and I've always been hyper tuned to that. Yeah. And it can affect me. So it's like, what do I need to do to really be in that space?
So I'll say, and I don't know your history as a kid growing up, but I can tell you from mine that I'm also one of those people that can quickly pick up on other people's energies. I've also been trained to read body language as well. But for me, or a lot of the research will say that people that are more empathetic have gone through a lot more trauma as a kid, and it's been more of a survival mechanism to assess the threat in the room. And so trauma doesn't have to be like complete sexual abuse or anything along those lines. It could just be like constant argument in the household, or constant expectations being let down or not feeling good enough. And so they're having to constantly prove themselves. And those individuals typically will be more hardwired to pick up those cues to make sure that, one, they're safe in their environment, and two, to understand, like, do I need to get out? Do I need to stay? So it's interesting.
Yeah. And, you know, I've done a lot of excavating around that in myself just in the last year. And that's been interesting because I tend not to think back on my childhood too much. And when I did the ACEs score, the Adverse Childhood Experience score, which I recommend people check out, like mine is really super low. Yeah. So my traumas are more like the constant awareness of like my dad being mad, because I was scared of my dad. He was big and he was scary, but he's a super nice guy. Right. And like he did a great job. He was a great dad. My parents are both passed now. And anyway, though, I was like hyper tuned into that, and I was the littlest one in the family. So, yeah, I think that there's a lot around that.
Oh, absolutely. For me, I had a little bit more traumatic experiences that caused me to be more hyper aware, which has led me into one of the most amazing providers that I think that my experiences, I've had a vast range. I mean, which I've been able to relate to a lot of different people, from sexual abuse with the whole gymnastics when I was a kid growing up, and then, you know, family friends. And then I've had where I fell into alcohol because I wanted to escape that feeling of feeling just like gross in gymnastics with my coach. And then, you know, having a kid out of wedlock, and then having to find a career on my own, and women in an all male environment. I mean, there's just so many things that I've, like, when I look back now, married and then divorced, it's like,
and I'm not even sure you mentioned the male-dominated fields that you're in, like military and sports. I mean, come on.
It's a lot. And I think that the way that I've gotten through a lot of those is realizing that they're not always for me, that everything that I've gone through has also been to relate or to build somebody else up in a different way. So that I'm like, okay, it doesn't, you don't get stuck in feeling sorrow for yourself or sad. It's like, I'm going to get through this, and I know that I'm going to be able to help another soul, another human being, quicker, faster, and understand and hold space for them, not to like pull them through the journey, but to hold space for them, to allow them to grow and know that they're not alone. Because I think we shy so much on, like, I shouldn't be saying this. This is, you know, my stuff. This is Ucky stuff. I don't want the world to see this, but what if the people that are up top that have made it very successful have had the same crappy kind of situation that you've been in, and they still made it, and they can make it too, kind of thing.
Oh, so well said. Yeah. And if we can, you talk a lot about reframes, and that's like a huge reframe of how you can see your own obstacles,
Absolutely.
essentially, and get through them in a totally different way when they have some kind of purpose
Yes.
almost attached to them.
I would agree with that. And then just understanding that, like, I don't know how much you go into like the soul's journey. I'm really big
into it.
Okay.
I'm here
love
for it.
Me, same.
Great.
So I truly believe that, and I have an amazing mentor that I see now who's like my energy kind of healer, helper. Her name's Amanda. She's fantastic and has really helped me grow in the last couple of years and accelerate the growth. When we're talking about like, I just want to accelerate this. I want to, I don't have to sit and just, when's it coming? Like we're energetic beings that get to create our own force. And so why not get in tune with what that looks like to be able to have more access to opportunities and things, manifestation, if you will, come your way. And so working with her, you know, our souls before entering our, you know, our bodies, pick the things that we're going to go into or experience. But when we get into the earthly body, we're not always aware because we're so, you know, 5 sensory that we're like, oh, why is this happening to me? And then if I can just step back from them, it's like, I welcomed this into my world because this was the lesson that I chose that I wanted to learn. And now that I understand that, I mean, you have to be on a more transcendence level, because any level underneath there, you're now adding judgment with hard emotions to it, and it's hard to separate it. When you're at SelfTranscendence, which is what I did my dissertation on, more of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, the top of his pyramid in most books will say self-actualization. Right before he died, he did a whole research on self-transcendence and how you can see yourself almost like in an aerial view, seeing the person, just let's just say you got an argument with somebody not being nice to you, but I'm not holding judgment to it. I'm just watching it unfold and not having an opinion to it. I mean, you can, but then I'm now back down to another level. And if I do, then I'm like, okay, that person's struggling with X. That's a them thing, not a me thing, and I don't have to hold on to it. So that's one way to separate the conflict between two people or the situation or event.
Do you do actual visualizations around this?
I have with myself for sure, and I have with other clients too, depending on what the situation may be with them.
So maybe you just close your eyes and actually visualize the situation and you above it?
That, and if there's somebody so I love my mom to death. She's incredible. And we talk
okay, I feel like that's a little disclaimer there. So,
and we talk about this quite a bit because we're both on different levels, and that's okay. Like I love my mom for who she is, but I can't love her for who I want her to be. And so there's sometimes that I want her to be on this plane, but she's on this plane.
Oh my gosh, that goes for so many people. You
so
know?
many,
and it's frustrating because you're like, come on,
and you're like, if you would just respond here, this is all I need. But my mom won't ever be able to fill some of these needs that I need her to do, and so then I'm getting frustrated at her. But she's doing everything to the top of her capability to be able to provide, to show love, to show support. But this gap of what I feel I need is never going to be fulfilled. And so now I'm causing conflict because I'm more self-aware of what that need is and what she can and can't do. But she's, in her mind, doing everything. Like, what more do you want from me? Because this is all I can give. And so I have to acknowledge, and I think about this too with my ex-husband, I truly believe that he loved me to the best of his capability, but I needed this and it wasn't happening. And so still love him to death, but it's not what I needed. And he's on a different plane and I'm on a different plane. And I had one energy healer at one point that was like, Jess, you know, you're the problem in the marriage. I'm like, how dare you? It is not me. And she was like, it is you, because you're aware that he can't meet this level on a spiritual and energetic level. He won't ever be able to meet that. And you're suffering him, trying to get him to that place, and his soul and journey is not there. He's here. And I'm like, I've never not been the problem, or I've never been the problem.
But
kind of
that's
thing.
such a wild reframe.
Oh my gosh.
Because
completely.
You're like, no, they're the problem because they're not doing it.
Correct. And I'm like, I know what they need to do. And they're like, no, that's you trying to pull them too far on their journey way ahead of time instead of letting them settle and do it. And they're like, and nor should you be having to slow yourself down to be on their journey. It's okay to still have love and support with each other, but be on two different paths. And but now then we get into cultural views of like, well, if I separate, then that means that like, here we go. I just went through a divorce, and what are we doing to the kids? But it's not even about the kids. It is, and I don't mean it that way, but it's not about the kids in the sense that when you think again about journeys and souls, the kids also chose this path and these parents and knew that this was going to be happening. Like we all did agreements before coming into our bodies. and then going forward.
That's such a trip.
Right?
Is there a difference between self-awareness and self-transcendence?
Yes. Big.
Oh, I'm so glad I asked, because I was thinking, oh no, she's probably going to go. No, it's the same thing. So.
There's different levels to it, I think. So self-awareness, I can be self-aware that my heart feels like it's beating out of my chest. I can be self-aware that the lights in this room are causing me to sweat or something. I can be self-aware that when I get nervous, my voice will start to shake, or I'll feel like a red tomato, and as brown as I am, I'll be red.
Mm-hmm.
So if I am aware of all these, I call them indicators. The self-awareness provide me indications of where I'm at. Self-awareness is allowing me to have more of a separation between body and soul, where I can just exist.
Or you mean self-transcendence?
Or self-transcendence,
yes.
Yeah, mm-hmm. Where I can just exist, and where I can just freely move and just feel like this. It's kind of like this ecstasy kind of feeling of just like flow and just ease. Ease is a good word for self-transcendence. It just feels ease. You have more of those kind of experiences where you're just like, this is how it's supposed to feel, and not forced. But some of the self-awareness we're having to do, like we're doing checks. We're just scanning. And if I'm scanning, then I'm not in a transcendent place, because I'm not like in this state of just like floating. I'm in the state of just processing. Ooh, that's a good way to see it. So I'm overlooking, but if I'm self-aware, I'm scanning where I need to be, what I should be assessing or feeling, thinking, and then I'm taking action to whatever it is my intention is.
So you need both.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Self-transcendence is hard because there's different stages of it, though. So when I say stages, like, so self-actualization is finding my purpose. I found my purpose. I'm living my purpose. And then above that, I just get to be free. And so where I don't have any judgments, I know I'm living my most authentic self. That's the place, that's like the goal to get to, the peak of the pyramid. Most people don't get past like the self and belonging stage. Like I feel like I have to be belonged to a group to appear, and never get past even like the pyramids of what is it? Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Mm-hmm. So
yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that, because I used to get kind of down on myself about this whole like find your tribe thing, and I'm not the biggest fan of that. How do you feel about that, especially since you work with teams?
I struggled with that, and I struggled with it even as a kid. I have taken the most unbeaten path, and it's caused me conflict in a lot of work conditions, because I speak more freely, and it's not to be condescending or to like put anybody down. It's just, can we create and think about something else? So, have you ever done what is it called? It's like, I want to say it's like a soul design or body design.
Human design?
Human design.
Yes.
Ooh, okay, there we go.
Mm-hmm. I'm a manifesting generator, but I don't know enough about it. So.
Same.
Okay.
But so those type of individuals can create things. We can say it and then naturally create it. So we get to say like, today I'm thinking that maybe I should do this. And then within a couple hours, somehow it's already like manifested and created.
Great.
So
it sounds about right.
We get to like move things quickly. And so for me, I would call things out. I'm like, well, what if we just did this? And then by the next moment I had it, but it was too fast for some people, because there's so many procedures that in the worlds that I operated in. And it was, we had to make a list, and then we had to talk about it. We had to do this. And I'm like, yeah, but what if we just did it? Like,
yeah, what if we just did it?
And so there's some struggles back and forth. So,
but I think there's a mental leap that you can make, that you can do that, which that's what I'm kind of saying on this show. I think when I say in a more efficient way, like you don't necessarily have to go through all this. Like, no, maybe you just do it.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I think that's when you're really connected with and in tune who you are and with the universe, and you just let it like be as is, everything naturally provides. And I've learned that more in the last 2 to 3 years than I could ever want. I left the military a couple years ago and moved out to Austin. Had no idea what I was going to do. It was like middle of pandemic. I had put in like easy 250 resumes to get on to somewhere. No response. And I'm like, I have all of these credentials, all these accolades, all the things I've done. I know I'm better than half these people that are putting them there. It sounds really cocky, but that's how I genuinely felt. And nobody was taking me in. And I'm like, okay. So then I'm like,
I mean, you are uber qualified. Let's be real.
I did feel that way.
Yes.
And then I'm like, well, clearly something else is happening or creating. But instead, during that time, I couldn't separate from the rejection that I kept getting from what I was meant to be doing. And if I would have just shifted over and been like, you're being rejected because there's this whole.
Are you ready to up-level your pleasure practice? I have in mind, and one of the tools that I've used is from Wands. That's Waands. One of my favorite items that they have is the cervix wand. It is their #1 best-selling glass pleasure wand for vaginal and anal de-armoring. That means more sensation. That means more getting in touch with your body. It's designed for cervical and G-spot stimulation, and it has helped thousands of women become more connected to themselves and their own pleasure while supporting them to heal pelvic pain through self-yoni massage. So if you are curious about getting more in touch with yourself, then I have an offer for you. You can get a discount using my code Amy Edwards, but if you use the link in the show notes, you can get 20% off from Wands. They have so many other beautiful items to choose from. With a large selection of 100% pure crystal pleasure wands, they create the most gorgeous, luxurious products that encourage you to honor your body, celebrate your sexuality, and live in pleasure, which is a big part of what we're about on this show. And yes, I use one myself. So go today to wands.com, that's WAANDS, and use the code Amy Edwards for 10% off, or use my link in the show notes for 20% off of your purchase from Wands. Again, my favorite is the cervix wand. It is trademarked and it is amazing. Take it from me. Check it all out and the reviews on wands.com. That's WAANDS.com, and use my link in the show notes for 20% off.
So the moment that I just kind of like reflected and found my mentor, things just moved. I still was without a job for about a year and a half during the pandemic when we moved. And I was like, well, maybe I'll just start my own sports psychology center. No job. I need a bank loan and all these things. So I went to 5 different banks, got denied. And I was like, that's okay. You just got to ask one more time. And this lady's like, absolutely. Like somehow I get this bank loan with like no job to support the bank loan in the meantime. But I knew that I could do it. And now I have this 2,600 square foot facility that trains cognitive performance and well-being in athletes and how to be able to like connect and move things with more ease. But I would never have thought like that would have been even an option a year and a half ago. And so now I'm like, okay, it's not, I have goals and I have intentions, but I also am in the moment and place in my life where it's like, let's see what cool stuff happens today. Like, what else pops up today just unexpectedly, and how do we roll with it? And like let the universe come and provide, because I know that it is.
Yeah.
Because everyone's like, why aren't you just terrified it's gonna like fail and like you're gonna go bankrupt and all these things? They're like, no, like I know that I am so universally like divinely protected, and that what will be shall be. And it when you get to that point of just freeness, you don't have to worry as much and be on these like 5 sensory levels of like anxious and doubt. Does it creep in? 100%.
Yeah, we're human.
We are human. But then on the same breath, I'm like, but every time it always works out. So
Every time it does.
every time.
I said that to a friend just the other night, and she was like, she's been going through some stuff, and I said, you're going to be okay. And she goes, you think? And I go, when have you ever not been okay?
Right.
Let's just really assess that. And
Yeah.
she thought about it, and then she was like, yes, I am. And I was like, yes, you're,
Yeah.
come on. And that's something I think that comes more with age and experience. At
Mhm.
least for me, it really has.
Yeah,
I'm hoping to model that to my children now.
for sure.
And I'm noticing that, I guess partly because I'm turning 50 like this week. I guess when this comes out, I'll have just turned 50.
Oh, that's
so
exciting.
yeah,
Happy early birthday.
thank you. And I've realized that I'm just over it with
Mhm.
worrying, and I'm just over it with feeling like I'm not going to be okay. I'm just over it. And
Yeah.
I'm moving into a new mental space where I've decided I'm
Yeah.
going to roll in this feeling good space, knowing it's all going to be okay, because it always is.
It is. But how cool if we can teach our kids to choose that early on and see the growth and momentum that they get, so much faster than what we did. Instead of being like, okay, I'm just exhausted of feeling this way.
Yeah.
Now I'm going to choose it.
Yeah.
Because that's what it was for me
It's
too.
kind of resulted out of
So
that
it was
for
like,
me.
cool, great, thanks. But now, like, because I'm doing the same thing with my daughter, and she's gone through some traumatic events with like her dad and my ex-husband. And so she's like, well, when does it ever get easier? And I said, well, it doesn't necessarily always get easier. It gets easier by how we choose to view the situations, and if we're going to choose to feel free or happiness. And she's 11 asking these pretty profound questions. And I'm like,
Well, she's your daughter. So.
I'm like, I think I answered that one right. But no, so it's pretty cool to watch her growth. And then so she had a couple friends that had some struggles too with like some family dynamics. And she was like, you just got to think about it this way. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm so proud of you. Like, way to encourage them the same way that we're talking even on the show. So
it's just spreading.
It is.
Oh,
this is so good.
That's so cool. And back to what you were talking about, I thought of a good example in my own life. When I was getting my first divorce, I was so nervous because I couldn't find a place to live. And I've been divorced twice. And I was looking for a place to live, and I was so stressed. And someone said to me, your house is out there. You just have to find it. And it was so comforting because I thought, I am going to live somewhere.
Right.
And it is out there.
Yeah.
Somewhere. And I thought, oh, and so, when you think about a job you want or a purpose or whatever it is, like, it's out there.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of getting there. And if we could all relax more into that knowing, like, it's out there, whatever it is.
Yep. We talk a lot too about if I'm living in the future, I'm creating anxiety. If I'm living in the past, I'm constantly creating depression. Now, there's extremes of anxiety and depression that I feel when I'm reviewing past or future. But when I live for now, you feel this level of just like where you could breathe. And we're not breathing enough. So then we're not getting enough oxygen to our head, and then not having clarity in our thoughts because now our emotions are taking over. And when we talk about like resetting the brain too, so a lot of our decision making and strategizing and thinking is all from our prefrontal cortex. The amygdala, which is what we call the emotional part of the brain, a lot of people do. I like to call it the familiarity part of the brain. It really just assesses, have I done this before, and is it a threat? If I feel like I've been in this kind of environment before, the last time it was probably scary. So now this time I'm thinking that it might be scary again. It's just an assessment of familiarity. And so the only way to shut down the amygdala emotional part of the brain is to rewire it from like going behind the brain. There's no direct relationship right back to it. So you have to take a nice, big, deep belly breath, slow your breathing rate down, so that you can slow the process. Because again, the amygdala can shut down the prefrontal cortex, but to do that, we have to go around the brain and shut it from behind.
What does that mean exactly, though? It means doing it from your breath, and that way, rather than trying to think it into change.
Because you're so emotionally triggered that your decision making and strategic thought process of how to shut that down has been override by your emotion brain.
So you come from like your physiology rather than.
Yep.
Okay.
And so now I'm slowing down my heart rate, and I'm just assessing the situation for what it is, again, for what I want it to be. And then I'm giving myself a directive like, okay, right now, just put your feet into the ground. So we're doing more grounding techniques to energetically reconnect with the electromagnetic energy in the ground, as we are human beings too. So now it's almost like our little reset. I always think of the Avatar movie. Have you ever seen Avatar? It's literally like that. So when they're like plugging in their tail into the tree, when we put our feet into the earth, we're really resetting and reconnecting from an energy standpoint and recentering our bodies to be able to have a conscious thought process of where we want to go next or what we want to do.
Do you do that every day? What do you do?
Oh, I'm not the best at it. What I do is a lot of salt baths. Salt baths collect energy as well. And so at the end of the day, one of my mentors had talked about energy hygiene. And so like brushing our teeth, we'll go and brush our teeth. We're not thinking when we're brushing our teeth, oh, I'm going to get all these like little germs out. I got one in the back. Like, we don't think like that. We just brush and then get going. But during the day, so we haven't talked about this yet, but we collect so much energy from everybody else. There is scientific data that can read that we can manipulate each other's energies up to 3 feet because our electromagnetic field is intertwined. And so if I wanted to, I start to, get my heart rate up. it would naturally increase your heart rate just because our fields are intertwined at the moment. Crazy.
So wild. So wild.
Then I can slow mine down and then make you feel calm. So if I was like, it's already starting to feel
nervous.
awkward.
Yeah. Yeah.
So like that one person, you're like, what are you doing? Please speak, please speak.
No, I clued into it. I was like, oh, I see what's happening here.
But so it can
And
make
then
somebody feel super.
I actually opened myself up a little bit to it too.
Oh,
instead of talking and filling the space, I was like, I see what she's doing, and I'm going to go with it. And so,
good.
you can choose to open up to it or not.
Yes, you absolutely can. And so most people aren't as attuned to that.
Yeah.
And so they'll start to be like, what, is she freezing? What's happening? We're on a show. Get to start talking. When that happens though, like it's interesting that it only takes one person to change that dynamic. And so we interact with lots of people throughout the day. Depending on what your job is, it can be like hundreds of people throughout the day. And you're constantly interchanging those fields and taking on some of those people consciously and unconsciously. So me being one of those people that did do that, one of the suggestions was taking salt baths. And a salt bath for 15 minutes, you put the Morton's iodized salt on there, like regular table salt.
Oh, not Epsom salt.
No, not Epsom salt, just salt.
Okay.
So you look like you're like in the movie Hocus Pocus and grabbing all the salt and getting ready to put like salt around the graves. And you just fill it up and you sit in it, and you don't have to do like any meditative songs or anything like that. You're just sitting, and all the emotions that you have felt throughout the day are like held onto the little crystallized salts. And as they go after 15 minutes, you don't want to be doing more than that, because then you're like seeing an emotional puke, if you will. And drain,
wow.
Yeah. And then you drain it. And then if you wanted to take a bath that had like bubbles or Epsom salt, then you just refill it back up and you get your relaxing bath at that time. But it's an energetic cleanse, if you will, or hygiene, just like you'd brush your teeth. You're doing that daily to take off all the stuff that you've collected throughout the day. And we don't do that nearly as much as we should as human beings.
What do you notice when you don't do it?
I get easily triggered.
Oh, like you're shorter with people
kind of thing? A lot shorter. Or I get muddled in which emotion's mine. Like I'll walk down the stairs and like, let's just say if my mom came over, I get overly irritated and I'm just like, I was just fine 5 minutes ago, but now I'm not. And it's just the fields of their energy, one that they're not as cleaned up. And if I'm not cleaned up, I think of it like Velcro. It just constantly sticks. But when I start to do the cleansing more often, mine starts to have more, as if it's like worn off. So it slides. So they may be Velcro, but it slides off of me.
I've never heard that phrase like that, where you say, I become confused on which emotion is mine.
Yes. It's fascinating when you start to pay attention to it, because I have walked into several different rooms, and this comes from what we call an open loop system in our brain. So we're hardwired to pick up subtle cues for survival purposes way back when, to know if like you're angry or upset, I want to be able to have that subtle cue to pick it up. Where you were like, I was really in tune with my dad. That's from our open loop system in our brain. And when we are hardwired and we tune into it, then we can unintentionally take on that person's emotional state. So, I mean, as easy as if going through like Starbucks and you're ordering a coffee, you get to the window and the girl's just like, here. And you're like, what the heck? Like,
oh, totally.
I didn't even do anything
Happened
to you.
Me at the dollar store the other day.
Right?
And she was like, we're closing. And I was like, well, can I still check out? And she was like, nope, you got to get. And I was like, I left and I was like,
And you just feel kind of like, ugh. But you just took on her stuff just
did.
because of how she responded. And now you're walking out like, ugh. And then you're calling somebody like, can you believe this? Like, this girl just told me that it was, all she needed to do is just leave it open for a couple of minutes. And now so that tells you how much attached you are. And then when you think about like to their emotional
I detached pretty quick. Thank God.
Well, that is good.
I gave it some thought and I was like, you know what? She may be doing inventory in there and that's why they're cleaning up early. And that place is a mess. And I feel for her, you know? And I was like, she didn't care about me for a second.
No.
So
and
I just let it go.
Too. So then I'm like, okay, I can see it's a them thing. And I literally have to do like almost a hand gesture back. Like,
oh,
like an
I like
so like
that.
an energy that their energy's coming in, and it's just like that's a them thing, not a me thing. And so it's just like I'm giving it back to you. And sometimes I'll do it if it's like a lot, I'll actually do it. And then sometimes it's just like I just kind of like brush it if I'm like out in public and I notice it.
That's one of the things that was in your TED Talk, because you talked about sending energy or emotions back to the person, and I made a note of that because I was just curious
Yeah.
if you had some actual, that is an actual tangible way to, even if it's not catching the energy in your hand,
Right.
it's enough of a device that your brain can just do it
Yes.
and decide
And
that that's helping.
So
Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Okay.
One of the other things that one of my mentors has done that I've been working on is cutting cords with people. And so,
Yeah, I've had a cord cutting,
oh, okay.
and I'm curious about the, I don't know, psychosomatic or placebo effect of it, I suppose, too. Is
That's a
it
good
that,
question.
or is it, that, I guess that's what I was looking for with the hands, too. It's like, can be just something that maybe it actually works, or maybe it just makes us think it does, and then it works by that way.
It probably is both.
Yeah.
For me, I'm really kinesthetic and visual, and so if I can feel like I'm pressing something back to somebody else,
What does kinesthetic mean?
Tactile
Okay.
and like physical.
Mm-hmm.
So I learn best those like from a visual and like physical way. So for me, it's a way to me to physically acknowledge that something is like bouncing back off of me. So for me, it works in
I
that
like that.
capacity. Some people are auditory, and so them just saying like it's a them thing versus a me thing, that might just do it. Just those phrases.
Mm-hmm.
The cord cutting from a somatic experience, I don't necessarily feel anything different in my body when I'm doing it. And sometimes I'm like doing it excessively aggressive. Where I'm
You
like,
do it to yourself?
I do it to myself.
What's that like? Can you?
So it's just as if I am grabbing the cords that I've experienced and attached, and then I'm just cutting.
Nice.
And I've taught my kids to do it.
And you wait, is that
So
clap part of it?
I was going to say the same
Okay,
thing.
so if you're just listening, she kind of looked like she
Okay.
was rolling up some
So
cords.
you want to take the cords from like your body, and you kind of image like your body's like maybe this big, like a little small Jess is over
Okay,
here, and
you're
I'm
like
taking,
a foot tall.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'm taking my small Jess body, and I'm taking the cords from it, and I'm grabbing them, pulling them tight, and then I'm cutting them 3 times. 1, 2, 3, and then I say black hole because I want to dump them into a black hole. So I say black hole, and then I clap twice, and then I clear the black hole. Because I don't want that energy to stay in this room or with me. So it travels somewhere else because energy, it doesn't necessarily go away. It just transforms or it goes somewhere else. So
Right.
Yeah.
You're not,
So
I mean, the energy's still there
correct.
somewhere.
The other suggestion that I've been told is salt bowls. So in a workspace where it's like super cluttered and frustrated, salt bowls, the same salt that you
Are
take.
you a witch?
No.
Come on.
Oh, no. I know it sounds so crazy, but I've gotten into it in the last like year and a half, and it has
I
helped
think you might be.
me significantly. It's okay.
I'm into it.
Hey, I'm Irish.
So
it works.
sorry, salt bowls. Let's start.
Yes.
So what do you do with those?
I'm learning all this stuff as I'm saying it too. You just fill a bowl up with salt and water, and you place it in the room. So the same thing we were talking about, like with the bath salts. It collects the energy in the room, and at the end of the day, you're dumping it down, and you say blessings, blessings, blessings down a toilet, and
Yes.
and then it goes away. So and then you fill it back up the next day, but you don't want the bowl to stay more than 24 hours because again, it's like an emotional bowl of puke, and it's collecting things. It helps it ease. I used it. I had one of my best friends. Her daughter had passed away last year. She was about to turn 1, so 10 months on a tragic incident. Had flown in on an immediate like flight to go and check on her a couple of days after she had passed, and I was like, we just need to do salt bowls. And I mean, she didn't want to talk. She started like whispering. I can't even fathom that kind of loss at all, but wanted to support her in any way I could. So we were doing several salt baths a day, and she was doing them even like a couple weeks after I left, a month after I left. And it's not that things go away, it's the intensity of the situation that starts to dial down, and for you just to kind of just be there rather than lost in your head or energetically connected to all these other really intense emotions that you can't process naturally on your own. And so for me, that's helped just kind of release. And you afterwards, somatically after the salt baths, for myself, you just feel clean. Like you don't feel cluttered or like small. You feel clean. It's hard to explain.
No, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Do you do anything after that? Is that a good time to meditate? Is that a good time to have some other type of practice that really, I don't know, maybe sets you up in a neural way that benefits you?
Meditation is not a bad one. It depends on the individual and like their timing of stuff too, because people can become overly rigid in their practices.
Oh,
And
I've
so,
been there.
yeah, where it's like I have to do this for 10 minutes and then it's another this and then you start to lose the real intent as to why you're doing
Just
it.
becomes a checklist.
Correct. And so I never say that you have to do one thing over the other, like morning or night. Get it in. Like you try to brush your teeth as early as you can in the morning. Everybody tries to do it 2 to 3 times a day, but that's not always the case. When you have the time and availability, the more cleansed you are, the less that you're reacting to other people. And when you start to have those moments where you are reacting more, then you're like, I don't think I'm as clean as I thought I should be.
This is a good time to talk about this idea that I'm super fascinated by of emotional contagion.
Oh, yeah.
Which you talk about in your TED Talk some, and you've mentioned it in other places. And I just read something about this, and I brought the book, but I can just paraphrase, but it's in Ego is the Enemy. But it was talking about an innocence climb when the team is first, team together and, they're like rising up and winning and really, the underdog effect, I suppose. And then once they're on top, then all these egos are clashing. People can't work together.
Yep.
And I thought that was, I happened to just flip that open the other day and read it. And then I was studying you, and I thought that's such an interesting example because we've all experienced that in some way. And I've never heard the term emotional contagion until you. And I like that a lot because it is contagious. So
Absolutely.
I thought maybe we could just talk about, since we're talking about picking up energies and stuff,
Yeah.
which is so interesting too, because I think people probably look at your work and think it's all science, which this is science.
Yeah.
But it's about energy.
Yeah. And then they're like, wait a minute. Are you a witch? No,
That's right.
I'm just teasing. No, that's a really big part to any type of team dynamic, relationship, in any sort of, like, people in general.
Right.
It's just people.
Families. I mean, like, doesn't matter.
Above.
Yes.
So,
Pick your group of people.
Yes. So it's the idea that when we walk into a room that we can pick up each other's emotional states, but not only that we hold on to them throughout the day. And so as we hold on to them throughout the day, we are constantly compiling all of these, whether it's with our kids, our spouses, our coworkers. And the more that we tend to do that, the more that we are just, like you can see it in people's reactions. And the more that we're self-aware and self-regulated, the less that we're susceptible to emotional contagion. We're all susceptible to it, but the less that we stick to it. And so I like to refer it to this principle that I called the jumping cholla effect.
Yes, please share that.
So back when I lived in Arizona for several years, I would go hiking all the time up these trails. And there was like this huge, giant, nice little teddy bear looking shrub. And every time like I passed it, I was like, oh, that looks kind of soft. Well, I was like the idiot that was like, let me go touch this cactus. So I went to go touch the cactus, and its spines on it break. And so the closer that you get to it, it jumps off of you and attaches to you. And the more you try to pull it off or detach, it just splits, and then it spreads to the other parts of your body. So the only way that you can really get them out is to pluck them one by one to get them off. So you have to be super intentional about like which one you're doing and how you're doing it and where it's in relation to the other things.
Sounds awful.
Painful. But so are emotions. And so I like to think that just like the jumping cholla, emotions are just like them. They jump off of people and they burrow deep into our skin, and we let them sit there unless we are aware or intentional about that's not my emotion, that's somebody else's, or it is mine and this is how I need to correct it. We are just constantly spreading it throughout the body. And the way that emotions and stress works is it harbors in certain parts of our body, which then can cause us to be eventually seriously ill in any sort of our body because our body's responding. And from an energy standpoint, the way that it connects with when we enter these emotional contagion states is that it hits energy level first, like our electromagnetic field. Then it hits your thoughts. Then it hits your emotions. And then it hits your physical state. But we often don't react to any of it until
what was the first one? Energy?
Energy.
Thoughts,
Emotions, and then your physical state.
Okay.
once it hits our physical state, we're like, oh, I'm just so tired. Well, you had 3 other warnings right before there, where it was like, you could feel like, oh, I'm feeling a little like, ugh, but we ignore it. And then your brain's like, man, I think I'm getting kind of like foggy in the brain. And then emotionally, you're like kind of tired. And then physically, your body just starts to ache or slows down like in its gait, the way that it walks. But we don't notice it until we hits our physical. But now it's been harbored there for a little while. And talk about being even more intentional of having to recorrect those and what's been in it, because now it's in your body. It's not just in the field of energy. It's not just in your thoughts. It's not just in your emotions. It's physically stuck now. And you have to really be intentional of how to physically release those things.
How do you do that?
Therapy.
Therapy.
I mean, that's part of it, but it's holding space for yourself. The salts bath is another really good one. Once it's in your physical state, we do a lot of different techniques where it's like magic boxing or just like reframing the situation. A lot of cognitive behavioral kind of therapies as well.
Doesn't some movement simply help? Just movement?
Movement, grounding techniques is another really big one that we talked a little bit about, of like getting outside and doing 3x3 or 5x5. So it's, I see the sun, I can feel the wind, and I feel the grass between my toes. And
is that a 3x3? I don't know what that means.
Yeah. So I'm calling out 3 sensories, 3 items. So, or 5x5, 5 senses, 5 items that I'm like calling it out and taking breaths in between there. So a 3x3, looking at the sun, or I see the sun, I feel the wind, and I'm touching the grass between my toes. And then each time I'm doing it, I'm doing 3 really big, deep belly breaths to slow my heart rate down and to be really grounded into the moment, to being able to re-engage.
Those are great techniques.
Yes.
Those are super accessible and easy techniques, which I'm all about, because sometimes you're like, oh, now I have to go to therapy or something.
Yeah. No, there's very practical ones that everybody can do. So the salt bath is an easy one. Energetically, just clapping and being obnoxious on clapping for like a good 30 seconds to 45 seconds. And you're like, am I done yet? But that clears out energy in a room too.
Really?
Yes. It's the weirdest thing. So if you have ever gone to a conference, or I think about this a lot because I've done some work with Tony Robbins and Dean Graziosi. And after their...
I just thought of Tony Robbins when you said that,
that's
actually.
So funny.
Yeah.
So after a lot of their breakouts, or before a breakout that they do with a lot of their groups, they'll all just start clapping. And I'm like, I wonder if he's been taught that. I haven't asked. I should. But they do that. And I was like, interesting, because I just got, taught that concept a couple years ago about how much it cleans out the energy and stuckness, or to get them up while everybody's clapping. And then they move on to their breakout rooms. And then everybody's so excited and pumped, and the energy's like reset because they just sat for an hour listening to lecture. And now you're wanting them to do applied work. And so they'll go in and, so it just kind of resets, which is
And
cool.
I mean, I can imagine people, oh, sure, that's a bunch of, whatever.
Right.
But it really does work.
It
You
does.
really do feel better.
Yes.
I've been in those situations where you clap or do something that resets.
And I've been the person that's like, I'm not clapping.
Me too.
I'm not going to clap.
I'm a little too cool for that.
Yes. I have felt that way too. I'm like, this is just dumb. And then I'm like, fine, I'll do it because everybody else is doing it. And then I'm like, oh. And I'm starting to sit up taller, and I'm like, okay, it's working. And I'm like, even more mad that it's working. But I was like,
that's right. I know. I heard somebody say the other day, it was Tim Dillon, and he was talking to Joe Rogan, and he was saying, I love being wrong. And I thought, what a cool thing to say and embrace. I love being wrong. He's
so
like,
good.
Maybe I'm wrong, and I love being wrong. And I thought, that's pretty innovative, because most of us are pretty attached to being right.
Yes.
So if you're in this, if you get into your awareness and you notice an emotional contagion situation, or it's catching on, everyone's getting pissed off or unhappy, whatever it is, what can you do to stay out of that? Is clapping an effective strategy? Like, I mean, you might worry about looking crazy to these people, but what are some things that people can do to ensure in that moment that they're helping to reset the vibe, or at least staying in their own, space?
That's a good question. Probably clapping out loud is probably not like the most effective
might
thing
feel
for them,
weird.
100% feel
But
weird.
as for you or me, we'd probably be comfortable doing that.
I'd say yes.
Yeah, which
And-
I probably would.
Or I'd, just make it, which is interesting because then you're also setting everybody else around that starts to look, And then they start to lighten up too, which is
That's
really,
right.
it's so, I mean, it still works, but if somebody's not at that level of comfortability yet, then I would really look back into like deep breathing and grounding. And those ones you're not having to do out loud. You don't have to take your shoes off. It's just quick interactions where you really are just connecting in with the sensories around you, and then setting intention for what your next step is. Because at that point, when somebody is overwhelmed or inside their head, I can say, well, I want you to now think this. Well, they're super analytical already. That's not going to be retentive at all or help them in any way because they're already trying to process so much. So the person that is in this ruminating or overwhelming state inside their head cognitively, then I would tell them to do more of a physical thing. And so like when I'm presenting sometimes and I get overwhelmed with the crowd, or I just did this at this lecture in Florida. If I'm getting ready to start, I know one of my indicators that I get over amped up is the shakiness in voice. Didn't happen, but I make sure that it doesn't by like curling my toes in my shoes. And so like even while we're talking, like you haven't seen my feet, but they'll clench. And it's just to reduce all the extra energy that I have, because otherwise I'd be like, oh my God, Amy, this is awesome. Like, what are we? And like the rate of speech would increase. And then like you would see me fidgeting. So if I can place energy elsewhere, you have no idea that I'm like,
I'm clenching my toes right now.
right? And you don't know. But like your rate of speech doesn't change. Your physiology up here doesn't change. Nobody has to know what's going on, but I'm dispensing the energy somewhere.
It's getting some out.
Yeah. And so at work, you could do it that way, or even sitting like this, how we're sitting, like squeezing the inner thighs. You have no idea that I've been doing that either.
No.
Yeah.
And to get a minor workout with
Right?
it. Yeah.
Exactly.
One of the strategies that you had also that I think you almost kind of touched on what you were just talking about, and it reminded me, was just saying okay.
Oh, yeah.
And there's such like a detachment from engagement in that. And I've done that with my kids and my partner. It's challenging sometimes, but it's so good if you can find that space.
Yes.
So you can, I'll let you describe.
Yeah. So I describe a 3-step framework, and it's okay, so what, now what? And the okay is really just stopping any additional judgment that you have to the situation. And so if I can just, and it's not that I'm stopping the situation, it's stopping me from continuously reacting to it. So if I'm like, okay, because everybody.
It's like an acceptance.
Correct. It is. And so as soon as I say okay, then I can say so what. So what allows me to have like more of this aerial view of what's happening. And in that aerial view, most people are trying to push for their objective to be completed. But if I can step back and say, okay, this is what my partner was looking at, this is what my daughter was, this is where I was. All right, I see it from all perspectives. Now what is, well, what do I need to do? Do I need to attend to him? Do I need to attend to her? Or do I still need to feel like I need to get my voice across? And then if you're willing to go back into that battle, then great. But if I can separate the three, how you end up doing that, the okay part stops it. I have to accept the situation for what it is and not for what I want it to be. That's super hard. And when I say the so what part, that means that maybe what I wanted isn't what it's going to be, but I still have to accept that this is the dynamic right now. And the now what part is maybe I have to like sit back for a second, and that's even more hard because egos are selfish and they are.
And that so what can be hard, but sometimes, at least for me, I can imagine putting it into a term of a year from now, would I care about this at all? And you'd
That's
be
a
like,
good one.
no. And so
It's
what?
so true,
what?
though.
So what then? Like
Yeah.
maybe they get their way. Maybe I don't have control of the situation.
Right.
I've been working on control a lot though.
Yeah.
So
You and me both.
it's a practice.
and me
It's a
both.
practice.
Yes.
Yeah.
But that's exactly what it is, though. So the so what part is like making sure that you can just, you see all angles and then picking out what places you want to. And I talk about that too, of like, it's assessing if it's worth attaching to. When we talk about like attaching to other people's emotions, do I want to attach to this right now or do I want to detach? And if I don't, then I'm going to take this route. And if I do, then I'm going to still take this route. And that's okay. Nothing, it's not bad. You probably could get to an end goal quicker, faster, a different way, but that's still where you have choice to make.
That's interesting too. Like saying, do I want to attach to their emotions? I guess if it's good ones.
Yeah.
If it's joy.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
I'll
Yes.
get into a space of joy.
Absolutely. Yeah.
That would be an instance where choosing it could be really
Absolutely. And that's when you're coming in already at a low frequency of energy, and you see like a coworker, they're just like excited, and you're just like, today's not exciting though. Like, why?
Yeah.
Like, and that's the moment where you get to say, okay, now how do I want to approach this? Do I want to be the crabby person for the rest of the day, or do I want to attach to their level of joy? Because they can change you, or you can end up changing them pretty quickly. 'Cause it only takes one.
It's interesting. I was just thinking about how so many times we say laughter is infectious and all these
Yeah.
things. It's the same contagion. Why would we say this one emotion is contagious,
Right.
but these other ones aren't?
Right.
Of course, any of them can be.
Absolutely.
Are we quicker to catch the low vibe ones than the high vibe ones?
Yes, based off of survival.
What? Oh,
Yes.
damn it. No.
But I think that when we are in a state of like the transcendent state and self-aware state, we have quicker access to the other ones, but we're more susceptible to the lower frequency ones because we're hardwired to pick up the dangers in our environment.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So we mentioned intention at the beginning,
Yes.
bringing that back around. You said you have that up in your space, right?
I do. So I'm a big fan of saying intention over goals. I think goals have been somewhat overused, and we just say, okay, what's your goal for the day? Well, it's not, I have lots of goals, but what's my intention for like right now? What's my intention for meeting somebody? So every conversation that you have, there's an intention behind it. Not necessarily a goal behind it, but there is definitely intention. Like I wanted to meet you. I wanted to be on your podcast. I have intention that this could build a great, relationship, friendship, and connection later. There's intention behind everything that we do. Some people just continuously go and not aware of that intention, where they get more dictated by others based off of that person's intention, and they lose sight of themselves, which is why they're also in the same breath where they're like, how did I get here? Well, because you haven't set intention. You've let other people's intention navigate.
Run the show.
Absolutely. And so with my athletes and my clients on our whiteboard space, we have 3 walls like this, and all of it's a whiteboard. And at the very top, it says, what's your intention? And so every time that we talk about like competitions or practices, what's your intention for today in this moment, or each round that we go into, each round has a different intention. You might have an intention for the practice, but now for this segment, what is it? What is it for this one? I love it.
It's a habit.
Yeah.
Getting intentional. I've had to
Yes.
get intentional about getting intentional.
It's true though. Yeah. It's very much habitual. But it's habitual, but you also have to be deliberate in the directives that you're giving yourself. So if I were to say, well, my intention today is to not mess up. Well, that's horrible. No, that's not your intention. Try again is usually what I say. And they're like, but I don't want to mess up. I'm like, I know that, but try again. Like what do you want to do? And so where we place our brain's attention dictates the intention. So intention and intention.
Yeah, you say the words mess up. Now you're thinking mess up. At
Correct.
least for me, I'm so intentional about words that I use that I
Yes.
would never say it's not to mess up, because I'm guaranteed to mess up.
Well,
at
our
that
brains
point.
can't process anything after that. So if we say the word don't, if I say don't look at the plant behind you, or don't look
Right.
at the TV screen, you're like, wait, what happened? I need to look at both of those right now.
Yes.
But if I say, Amy, keep your eyes on me, your brain just dissipated those comments previously, and the directive was to me, so the eye contact maintains. And so we have been trained, I think, just from experience and cultural, that we say the words don't, shouldn't, wouldn't, couldn't, but those cause us to have the wrong attention that leads us down the wrong intentional path of whatever actions that we're wanting to take. And so the directives that you say is imperative to setting intention.
How important is saying it out loud?
It depends on the person.
Oh, like you said, the auditory thing.
Yeah. So
that was an interesting distinction, because I'm so focused on voice that it's really good for me.
Right.
And I just assumed it's good for everybody.
And it's interesting given your career path too, because it is more audio related, and hearing it in the mic, or hearing yourself through the headphones and things. So for you, yes, I'm sure that it is out loud. For me, writing it out is most, because I'm kinesthetic.
Yeah.
And then I have to see it on the board too. But if I can incorporate all 3, it's even better
Me
for
too.
retention. So,
Me too. They
great.
all help me.
Yes.
If I can write it too,
Yeah.
that makes a huge difference. Do you have a writing practice every day, or that you do?
I do.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do have a journal that I write into, and I set my intentions every single day.
What's that like for you?
it's another grounding technique for me.
Mhm.
It helps me get out of my head of all the things, because then I get into task oriented of like all the stuff that I still haven't completed, all the things that I still need to do for tomorrow. So then I'm living in the past and in the future.
Mhm.
And so if I just set intention for the morning, and I'll do it in blocks, like block or time blocking. What's my intention for the morning? What's my intention for the afternoon? And then what's my intention for at home? And when I get home, it's the energy cleanse. Like I have to just reset. In the morning, it's more cognitive driven tasks. And then in the afternoon, it's more like physical power movement. So a lot of my sessions with athletes are in the afternoon because we're more physically engaged. So when we look at circadian rhythms, our brains are best optimal in the morning for cognitive tasks. We're more primed in the afternoon for physical tasks than we are at any other point. And from 1 to around 3, we call it the postprandial dip, where your brain kind of does go into that, foggish kind of state because our brains just can't process based off of our natural circadian rhythm of how we operate.
Siesta time.
Yes. Everybody that should have a lunch break. That
Yes.
just sleeps.
Should all just take a break right around then.
Exactly. Yes.
Get back to it later. And then what is evenings?
Evenings. So if I
Like a
was
winding
an
down.
athlete, I would be a power lifter in the afternoon.
Mm-hmm.
If I was a runner, I'd be doing more runs in the morning than I would in the afternoon.
Mm-hmm. What do you do for
What do I do?
physical?
So I've had an interesting journey over this last year. I had a hysterectomy that went bad last June.
I'm sorry.
4 surgeries. Doctor messed
Oh
up.
my God.
And I was in the hospital for almost 3 months. I got out like October, November.
Oh, Jess.
Yeah.
Wow.
While going through a divorce during that time
Oh
too.
my God.
Yeah, signed the papers in the
Whoa,
hospital. That was fun.
Representative
when
of something, isn't it?
When I talk about like really doing this energetic cleanse on myself, like I've been super intentional about it in this last year. But I didn't get off medications until about March because the inflammation and infections. So
Wow.
it's been a tough journey. I just started probably about 2 weeks ago of actually just walking and getting active again because I was starting to have inflammation in my joints, like arthritis kind, where I couldn't get up like out of bed. Like my arm would be paralyzed and I'm like, what is going on? But it was medically induced, or the medicine induced all the arthritis where I was having all these pains. I was walking on the sides of my feet because I couldn't walk on my feet. It was just horrible. So, and I've been athletic for most of my life, but I'm now super swollen and inflamed from all these traumas from last year. So I'm like really honed in on making sure I stopped all medicines. I've taken like super control over that because they wanted to put me on like chemo pills for it. And I'm like, not doing that either. Like going back to 100% holistic health and like getting my body just attuned to itself and like regenerating its own level of health. And I have had some episodes of inflammation, but not nearly as much as I was when I was listening to all of doctors are great. I'm not saying they're not. Just like what was working for my body wasn't working with what they were prescribing.
Yeah.
So
how did you keep your mindset in a good place? How did you
that's a great question.
keep up with these things that we're talking about through all of that?
Yeah. So the bank loan was happening while I was in the hospital. So I'm having business meetings while I'm like prepping for surgery.
I mean, you were in the hospital for 3 months
Off and on.
with a 2-year-old child.
Yep.
At the
2-year-old and a 10-year-old.
And a 10-year-old.
Yep. And my mom was helping with that. And
Thank goodness.
There's no way I would have. At one point, they were like, Jess, it's either...
Well, there is a way. You would have figured it out
That's
somehow.
true. It was either you fight or the worst was happening. Because at one point, I was like, I'm done. I just need to give up because this was too much. And it was...
Oh, wow. That doesn't sound like you at all.
At all.
But
it was the lowest
hit
point
that
that
point.
I've ever been. Well,
Wow.
like physically, my body was shutting down.
Yeah.
And I looked gray and ashy. And it was the doctor that had come in and was just like, Jess, the worst is happening. So you either fight or you don't. Because I had gone septic and I had a nephrostomy tube put in. I had the catheter for 12 weeks, both of those.
Oh my gosh.
I couldn't shower. I mean, a 10-year-old was having to bait, like,
there goes your salt practice. Yeah,
100%.
you're collecting
So I
energies
was
all
done.
over the place
Everywhere.
on top of this.
100%. So mentally, I struggled. And I have a pretty big Christian faith. Like, I am very faith-based, spiritually based, more than faith-based. They're intertwined, depending on who you're talking to. But for me, it was listening to a couple of friends would send me some podcasts and some like spiritual scripts and had their church like praying over me and whatnot. And there was this moment where it was, sometimes I give you like the worst circumstances. I'm going to completely break you apart like a phoenix, if you will, and rise from the ashes. But the part that I heard the most was, I need you to be at the most raw state possible so that you can hear my voice. So when I say go, you go. When I say stop, you stop, from God. And so I'm like, holy shit, that's it. I was like, this is why this is happening, because I kept asking for clarity and help and all these things. And I'm like, but I can't hear you. I don't know I don't know if I should be this one or this one, because I'm hearing all these different voices. And I was like, but you didn't have to do this extreme. Like halfway through, I'm like, but you didn't have to go to this level. And then I'm like, well, you're pretty stubborn, Jess. So maybe he did. I don't know. So I'm like, okay, but that was it. And the moment that clicked, like my health started to turn, and the bank loan went through. Like it was so many different things that happened right after. And I'm like, okay, maybe that really was it. And then, so I took more of a hard spiritual journey during that point.
You think it was moving more into that self-transcendence space and just surrendering?
Yes, 100%. That's exactly what it is. Because now it's not, when we say that we're setting intentions, I have goals for myself, but they're also just like, let's just see what miracle happens today.
Yeah. I just saw that meme where it's like, or read the story, whatever it was. I pictured it as a meme in my head, but it's like the little girl that's holding onto her teddy bear.
Yeah.
And God's like, I don't really like that God's taking her teddy bear, but whatever. Right. It's not the best right. concept, but God's got like a really bigger, badass teddy bear behind him, and is going to give her that. You just have to surrender whatever you're holding on to.
And I think I was holding on to so many things at that point, like my pride that I wasn't working for the first time in God knows how long.
Getting a divorce.
Getting a
huge one.
Was a big one.
I had my physical health took a turn during my second divorce. I couldn't believe I was getting a second divorce.
Yeah. So my daughter's dad left when she was 2.
Okay.
And then my ex-husband adopted her, and then we had a kid together. So I'm like, she was like, so are you going to find somebody else and they're going to leave me too? And I'm like, oh my God.
Oh my God.
Talk about the guilt as a mom. And then I'm like, okay, great.
I mean,
so many things. Yeah. And I'm like, I don't have, like, she's great. She's such a great kid, and she's been able to process pretty well. But she was struggling last year too. So she was in a very dark space.
Oh, I'm sure.
The
preteen stuff is already setting in.
Yeah. So we had to find, we had some major difficulties getting her to even to school, like acting out, just
on top of everything else.
On top of everything else. So that one was a heartbreak.
Wow.
But for me, I think it was holding on to faith, and that it's always worked out one way or another. And when coming out of the hospital, I'm like, this is my chance to really dive into who I am and stop living to try to make this family work when it's not going to, when we are on 2 different planes. That was a big one. And then as soon as we divorced, all of these opportunities just like spouted, and my growth has like substantially, where previously I didn't feel as seen. And now it's like, oh, hey, Dr. Garza, here you are. And I'm like, I've been here, but that's fine.
Were you in physical pain for a really long time?
Significantly.
Are you still, or?
So they're wanting to do a 5th surgery, because I have developed a hernia from all the incisions. I look like a little gunfight on my stomach.
Oh my gosh.
They wanted to do that 2 weeks ago, but I'm like, I'm traveling so much for work right now that we're going to have to like kick that can down the road. But yeah, so a little bit, but
it's just really tough to put all these things in practice when you're in pain. I just want to acknowledge anybody that might be in pain.
Absolutely. Because
it just adds this extra layer. And I'm speaking from experience. I got sick in July. I don't know what it was.
Yeah.
And my skin was hurting, and I just felt terrible. It's past now, but my gosh, it was so challenging to really put my practices in place. Like, I didn't even want to be touched, and I felt bad toward my partner, and was trying to power through things, and we have to go easy on ourselves and give ourselves some grace.
Absolutely. That's the biggest thing. And so I had seen the surgeon that wanted to operate again. He's like, because I'm like, oh, great, here we go. And he's like, well, how about we're just thankful that, like, when I read this, because I saw a different surgeon for this one, he's like, that we're alive. And I'm like, That's true.
Get the bar to the baseline.
But it was the first time that I've heard another medical provider finally say that, because I've gone through so many in this last several months trying to figure out what's wrong. And they're like, oh, nothing. And I'm like, it's not, there's something. And this guy's like, no, here it is. And I'm like, okay, so I'm not crazy. This is really what's happening. And then he was like, Jess, you've had some major, major trauma in this last year. Like, how about we just want to appreciate that, like, you are here and you're meant to obviously do some great things. And let's just hold some grace for that. Like, this vessel that you're in, how about we just show it some love again? And so even as someone that teaches this on a daily basis, I'm human too. We have to have those constant reminders ourselves to, like, be grateful for what this Jess in this present moment is doing, because she's fighting like hell and she's given it her all.
What do you think is the biggest thing you've learned in the last year?
That's a hard one. There's like so many different places I could go with that one. I'd say the biggest one is,
you could share more than one if you want,
giving it up, like not giving up, but letting things happen naturally. I like to control things. I'm sure everyone that's like in my world probably is like, yes, she does. Mm-hmm. And so I think stepping back and like letting that just happen, I won't have to feel as forceful, like trying to make things happen. And I think that's been the biggest struggle, like in a lot of different relationships and work environments, that I'm like, I just want this. And if I want it this bad, like it has to come to me, right? And it's just like, no, it doesn't. And you wanting it even more is not going to make it be there any less or more. And so just being okay with where I'm at. And I think that's the best part, like really living in the moment. And I hadn't done that, and like really just soaking in my little kids' face. Like, what if this is my last? And my friend's daughter, when she had passed, it's like, we really don't know how much time we have with anybody or anything. And to really value the seconds and moments that you get, or to just to have opportunities like this, like not in a million years, but I've been like, hey, Amy, let's connect. We didn't know this existed even like a couple, weeks, months ago. And so like just the gratitude that I have for life and people and their journeys has been the biggest takeaway, because it's all somehow intertwined, and I'm just more in awe moment by moment of every connection that I get to meet now, and truly value it for what it is.
Beautiful. Beautiful. This has flown by for me. I don't know if it did for you. You talked a lot, but it went by so quickly for me. And so as we're wrapping up, I want to turn it over to you. Is there anything we missed? Anything that you really wanted to make sure to say here today, or anything else that is on your heart that you want to talk about before we go?
The biggest thing is thank you, I would say. Oh. I think that the more people can be vulnerable in their situations rather than having to hide behind them, you start to really tap into your authentic self. And that along the way, we've gotten to this place where we feel like we have to culturally fit in, where we have to be a certain way, look a certain way. And I think that our journey in life as well is to find ourselves again. Like, we travel so far out of it, and then to find that unique state of our own and own it to the fullest level that we can helps us get to that place of self-transcendence.
Yes.
And so the more that you can travel back to you, like yourself, then the better you're going to be in this world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You are a wonderful example of that. And I have learned so much. I just was listening to you and I thought, well, that's a great clip. And that's a great clip. I just can't wait to share this entire conversation. And I would like for you to please share every way that someone can connect with you, find you online, all the things.
Okay. You guys can find me at Dr. Jess Garza on Instagram. My business is Altier TX. The business is called Altier. It's a sports psychology gym. And on LinkedIn, it's also Dr. Garza too. And those are probably the biggest platforms that you'd probably find me on.
And how can people find your TED Talk?
So if you guys were to Google Jess Garza and then how to avoid catching prickly emotions, that would lead you straight to the TED Talk.
Or you can go to the show notes, because I will put a link in the show notes and a link to every way that someone can find you and connect to your business as well, and hear more, because you have your own show as well that people can tune into.
Yeah, so that one here at IBL is 110% athlete overcoming barriers, and it's about really having healthy mental conversations. We talk a lot about mental health and people just shy away, but we're having just healthy mental conversations about the struggles of sport and life and what it takes to endure as an athlete and as a professional.
So important. And Justin's
Yes.
going to be a guest on there soon.
Yes.
So I'm excited for that
Me
too.
too.
Yes. And you'll have to go on his show too.
Oh, that'd be
I think
great.
you guys will have an epic conversation. So yes, I'm glad you mentioned IBBLE too. Thank you to IBBLE Studios and everyone here at IBBLE for supporting the show, for giving us this incredible space. Join the conversation further at IBBLE. Go to Get IBBLE and you can download the app and join the conversation. So I'm excited to keep exploring that app. So thank you so much to IBBLE for their support of the show. And thank you to you for your support. Thank you, Dr. Jess, for being here today. I can't even, this was all just
Thank you.
right up my alley. I learned so much and I just loved every second. And it's so aligned with the things that I've been studying right now too, about how we're holding on to things. So thank you so much for being here. And don't forget to connect with Dr. Jess. Everything is in the show notes. And keep the show growing, please. It takes all of us to keep everything growing. So if you liked it, please leave a review or a rating, share it with a friend, and sign up for my newsletter. It's at amyedwards.com. And I'm just so grateful that you're here. So keep up-leveling yourself and give yourself grace in all these moments.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Give yourself grace and just allow yourself to flow with it and keep learning. And who knows what life has in store for any of us. I'm just thrilled to be here right now, be talking to epic people like Dr. Jess and sitting here with you and all these people at IBBLE and just all the wonderful things that flow our way. So thank you so much. I love you so much. And till next time. Remember to rate, review, and subscribe. And thank you so much for being here. Sign up for our newsletter at amyedwards.com.